This backpack, it's my brother's.
I can't go home.
Chicago is white with wind as Alexander Thorne, a polished CEO with old grief, cuts through an alley. A barefoot boy curls against brick, clutching a faded backpack with peeling rocket stickers. "I can't go inside till I bring food," he whispers. Uncle says so. Alexander finds star drawings tucked inside, a mirror of his lost brother. If this is the second chance he never got, will he pull the boy from the storm? The boardroom still hummed behind him when Alexander Thorne stepped into the lobby, the victory glow turning cool against the glass. He looked like the magazine covers always said he did, a strikingly handsome man in his mid-40s, deep blue eyes, dark brown hair with elegant gray brushed to the side, a strong square jawline, thick eyebrows, and a warm, confident smile that covered what it could not cure. The winter outside pressed to the revolving doors. He straightened his custom navy suit, adjusted the red tie, and told himself to breathe before the storm took it away. Chicago waited in white noise. Snow slanted across State Street, wrapped around the high scaffolds of his newest project, softened the sirens, and made each step sound thoughtful. A driver idled at the curb and lifted a hand. Alexander lifted one back, then waved him off. He would walk. The air bit at his cheeks. It also carried the ghost of a boy's laugh he had not heard since he was a teenager. Gabe had been 14 when the state shuffled him to a house on the far side of the city. One visit missed, then another. A closed door here, a moved mailbox there, case numbers and wait lists, and no one accountable. The last time Alexander saw his brother, a social worker said, "We will call if he asks for you." No call ever came. Alexander learned to excel instead, to build towers and nodes and networks that connected a million strangers, while one string to his own past hung cut. The storm smeared the skyline. He adjusted his scarf and passed a florist shuttering early. The owner swept snow toward the curb and nodded. Alexander nodded back. He could feel the board's praise still stuck to him, a clean medal pinned where guilt should be, and it made him walk faster. He knew the checklist in his head by heart. A hospital wing to fund in Bronzeville, a data center upgrade, a call to his general counsel. But the list had holes the snow found first. At the corner, the wind cuffed him sideways and he slipped into a narrow service alley for shelter. Steam lifted from a manhole and turned the bricks into a damp, red tunnel. Somewhere, a deli door chimed. Somewhere, a bus exhaled. The city felt like a machine taking a long, careful breath. He liked alleys. They were honest. No one performed in an alley. You just got from one place to the next, you kept moving. You did not look anyone in the eye unless you meant to help. That had been the rule since he was a 17-year-old kid searching for an address that never led to Gabe. He had walked alleys then, too, carrying a second-hand jacket and a plan to apologize that never reached the right door. A gust cleared the steam for a moment. Alexander stopped. Against the far wall, tucked where a vent leaked warmth, lay a shape the color of the snow itself, small and still. Not a pile of rags, not trash. A child, curled into himself, forehead against brick like a runner bracing for the next lap. Bare feet pressed to a pizza box, thin shoulders shaking in a rhythm the wind did not make. Something old cracked and moved inside Alexander, the way ice shifts on the lake when a tug glides through. He stepped closer with his hands open, fingers spread, the way he approached skittish dogs as a boy. No words at first, just breath that made clouds between them and the slow bend of a man who had learned to lower his height so other people could breathe. The child did not lift his head. His knuckles were white on a small backpack, the fabric gone gray with years, the rocket ship stickers on it peeling at the corners. A patch of blue star paper showed through a tear. Alexander's vision blurred and then cleared. He had seen the same sticker once on Gabe's notebook, a row of stars Gabe drew like doorways. They had laughed about the way stars looked like the city from a plane, bright windows to climb through. "Hey," Alexander said softly, "it is brutal out here. There is a deli not 10 steps away. Hot cocoa, no questions. We can warm up and decide the next thing." The boy flinched. A small bird reaction, then went still. Silence answered. The backpack tightened under his hands. Alexander felt the old anger rise, the anger that had nowhere polite to go. He swallowed it and tried again. "My name is Alexander. I am not here to take anything from you. Not your backpack, not your place on the wall, not your choices. I am just here to make sure your feet find heat again." The wind quieted for a count of 3. The city listened. The boy shifted his cheek from the brick to the strap, and a dry whisper scraped out, more breath than sound. "I am waiting," he said. "For who?" Alexander asked. The boy's fingers dug into the rocket stickers. He did not answer. Snow found the back of Alexander's neck and slid under his collar. Alexander took off his coat and held it like a blanket between them, not touching, letting the warmth be an invitation. A door chimed again. Somewhere soup bowls clinked. Somewhere a bus hissed. The storm erased the boardroom, the skyline, the press releases. There was only a man, a child, and a backpack with peeling rockets that looked too much like a message sent years late. "Okay," Alexander said, voice even. "Then I will wait with you." The deli door swung shut behind him, bells jangling a tune too cheerful for a night like this. Alexander held the door a second longer than needed, letting the warmth push into the alley. He glanced back, snow swirling, bricks sweating steam, and saw the boy hesitate. Still clutching the faded backpack, bare feet stiff against the cardboard, he finally crept forward in tiny, uneven steps. Alexander eased the door wide, guiding him inside without laying a hand. The smell of roasted meat, dill pickles, and cocoa powder filled the small shop. Heat wrapped the boy in a visible shiver, his thin shoulders twitching as if unused to comfort. He looked out of place against the red vinyl booths and laminated menus, like a shadow forced into color. Alexander led him to the far corner, away from curious eyes, and slid into the seat across. "2 hot cocos, extra marshmallows," Alexander told the waitress before she could ask. She glanced at the boy's feet, then at him, then nodded and left without comment. The boy said nothing. He hugged the backpack to his chest, eyes fixed on the condensation sliding down the window. His lips moved once, soundless. Alexander leaned closer, softened his voice. "What's your name, son?" A pause. The boy's lips shaped the air again. This time, a whisper clung to it. "Liam." Alexander let the name sit between them. It hummed in his ears. Familiar, yet new. He nodded slowly, as if swearing to remember it always. "That's a strong name. Fits you." Liam's eyes flicked to him, doubtful, then back to the glass. His knuckles whitened on the strap. The backpack looked heavier than it should, as if its contents weighed more than notebooks and crayons. The waitress returned, sliding steaming mugs onto the table. Marshmallows bobbed on top like snowdrifts. Liam didn't touch his. He stared, wary, as though the cocoa might carry a trick. Alexander wrapped his hands around his own mug, took a long sip, and set it down with a sigh. "Too hot. Burns your tongue if you rush it. Better to wait a little." The boy mirrored him, hands small and cracked, circling the mug. He lifted it, blew across the foam, and took the tiniest sip. A marshmallow clung to his lip. He licked it away, expression blank, but his shoulders eased by a fraction. Silence stretched. The deli clock ticked. A man in a bear's cap paid at the counter and left. Snow hissed against the door. "You live near here?" Alexander asked. Liam shook his head once. "You got family waiting?" Another shake, then softly, like he couldn't help himself. "Uncle?" Alexander kept his face calm, but inside something shifted hard. "He must be worried," he said carefully. The boy flinched. "No," he said. "I can't come in until I bring food. He locks the door. Alexander's throat closed. He wanted to roar, to pound the table until someone else heard what he just heard. Instead, he leaned forward, voice steady. "Locks the door?" The boy nodded. His fingers fumbled with the zipper of the backpack, pulling it halfway open. Inside lay folded paper, edges frayed from handling. He tugged one out and slid it across the table. Alexander unfolded it slowly. Crayon stars filled the page, some bright yellow, some blue, all clustered around what looked like a door drawn in heavy black lines. His breath caught. Gabe used to draw the same. Stars like doorways. When the foster system split them, Alexander had found sketches left behind. Doors that never opened. Windows that led nowhere. His brother's silent code. He looked at Liam, then at the stars. The cocoa steamed between them. "Who drew this?" "I did," Liam whispered. "When I'm down there, I make doors so I can leave." The deli blurred. Snow outside pressed against the glass, muffling the world. Alexander folded the drawing carefully, slid it back into the backpack. His hands trembled once before he steadied them on the table. He had walked into storms before. Corporate storms, financial storms, but nothing like this. This storm reached backward, clawing at promises he had never kept. "Liam," he said gently, "no one should have to wait in the cold like you did tonight. No one should have to draw doors just to feel free." The boy's eyes flicked up again, searching, uncertain. Alexander let him see everything. Grief, anger, and something more dangerous than either. Resolve. He had failed one boy years ago. He would not fail this one. The waitress refilled their mugs. Liam took another sip, this time a little braver. Alexander leaned back, mind racing. There would be no going back to the boardroom version of himself now. Something had shifted in the alley, and it would not unshift. "Tell me about your uncle," he said softly. "Start wherever you can." The cocoa cooled between them as the snow thickened outside, swallowing the city in white silence. Liam sat curled against the booth, small fingers worrying the edge of his backpack strap. His eyes darted between the window and Alexander, as though any moment might bring a shadow through the glass. Alexander leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice low. "You're safe here, Liam. No one's going to come through that door and take you away." The boy's lips parted, but the words seemed heavy. At last he whispered, "Uncle says, if I talk, I'll stay in the basement longer." The phrase slid into Alexander like a blade. Basement. He forced his breathing steady. "What happens in the basement?" Liam hesitated, then pressed his cheek to the backpack as though it might shield him. "He locks me in. Says it's discipline. Sometimes for a night. Sometimes longer." Alexander swallowed hard. He could hear the hum of the refrigerator behind the counter, the scrape of the cook's spatula. Everyday noises, absurdly calm against the storm inside his chest. His mind reeled back to Gabe, his brother's drawings of padlocked doors, stars trapped behind lines. He had thought they were just sketches of a boy's restless imagination, but now they were a map. He reached across the table, palms up. "Liam, thank you for trusting me with that. What you just told me, it isn't right. No one should treat you that way." The boy's knuckles whitened on the strap. His whisper quavered. "If I don't bring food, he won't let me in at all. He says I'm too small to be useful." Alexander's jaw tightened. He wanted to stand, storm out, track down the uncle, and end this now. But he stayed seated, knowing sudden anger would only make Liam retreat. Instead, he softened his tone. "Do you have anyone else? A teacher? A neighbor? Anyone who helps you?" Liam shook his head, eyes fixed on the table. "Just the backpack. He doesn't look inside." Alexander studied the worn fabric, the peeling rocket stickers, a secret world tucked into canvas. He slid a hand toward it. "May I?" After a pause, Liam nodded. Slowly, Alexander unzipped it. Inside were crumpled papers, blunt crayons, a stub of pencil, and a few folded sheets already soft with use. He drew one out carefully. Stars again. Stars connected by lines that led to a door barred shut. Another page showed a small figure crouched behind bars, eyes wide. Alexander felt his throat close. These weren't just doodles. They were testimony. He folded the drawings back, slid them gently to Liam. "These are powerful, Liam. They tell the truth when words are hard. You're braver than you know." The boy blinked, startled by the praise. A faint flicker of pride crossed his face before he buried it again. The waitress set down a plate of grilled cheese, steam rising. Liam's gaze fixed on it. Alexander nodded encouragingly. "Go ahead. It's yours." For the first time, Liam let go of the backpack. He picked up half the sandwich, biting slowly, cautiously. Alexander watched, heart twisting at how deliberate each chew seemed, as if every bite needed permission. When Liam finished, he wiped his mouth on his sleeve. His voice was barely audible. "You're not going to tell Uncle, are you?" Alexander leaned closer, steady as steel. "No, Liam. I'm going to help you, but I need to understand more. Will you let me?" The boy hesitated, then gave the smallest nod. Outside, the snowstorm roared louder, shaking the window panes. Alexander glanced at the rockets on the backpack again. They weren't just stickers. They were a message, peeling, but still clinging, like a child's last hope. For years, he had walked past alleys, past doors, past missing pieces of his past. But tonight, staring at Liam's thin shoulders and those crayon stars, he knew the storm had delivered him here for a reason. "I lost someone once," Alexander said softly, almost to himself. "I promised I'd never let it happen again." Liam's eyes lifted, searching his face. For a moment, something like recognition flickered there. Alexander straightened, his decision hardening. He couldn't let this end at cocoa and sandwiches. This was only the beginning. The wind howled against the deli windows, rattling the glass as though the storm itself wanted in. Alexander sat steady, but inside his chest was a hurricane. Across from him, Liam held the empty mug with both hands, fingers still trembling despite the warmth. The backpack rested on the bench, now a silent witness between them. Alexander leaned forward, his voice low, deliberate. "Liam, no child should sleep in a locked basement. No child should be punished for being hungry. What your uncle is doing, it isn't discipline, it's cruelty." Liam's head dropped. "He says, it makes me stronger." Alexander's jaw tightened. He fought the urge to slam his fist against the table. Instead, he asked gently, "And do you believe that?" A long silence. Then, in a voice no louder than the storm's whisper, Liam admitted, "No, it just makes me scared." Those words cracked something inside Alexander. He exhaled slowly, steadying himself. His mind reached back to Gabe, his little brother shoved into a foster system that chewed up children and spat them out. Gabe had sent letters once, scribbled drawings of doors with stars around them. Alexander had promised he'd come. He never did. The guilt had lived with him ever since. He met Liam's eyes, voice rough. "You're braver than you know, speaking the truth. That's the strength your uncle could never give you." The boy studied him, wary but listening. His small hand brushed over the backpack, as though confirming the drawings were still there. Alexander pulled out his phone, stared at the screen for a long moment. The easy choice would be to call child services, let the system handle it. But he knew better. Too many cases slipped through cracks. Too many Gaves lost in paperwork. Instead, he slipped the phone back into his pocket. He would need proof. Something undeniable. "I want to help you," Alexander said firmly. "But we need to be careful. Tell me, does anyone else know what happens to you at home?" Liam shook his head. His voice came out flat. "Nobody listens." Alexander sat back, fury and grief twisting together. This wasn't just one boy's suffering. This was an echo of every child who slipped unseen through Chicago's alleys, carrying scars no one wanted to witness. A plan began to take shape. He would start with information, hard evidence no lawyer could twist away. He would use the tools that had built his empire: persistence, strategy, and the truth that money alone couldn't bury. He reached across the table, speaking softly but with iron in his tone. "Liam, I need you to trust me. I'm going to make sure you're never locked in that basement again." The boy's eyes widened. "But what if Uncle finds out?" Alexander steadied his gaze. "Then he'll find out the one thing he never expected, that you're not alone anymore." The waitress came by with the check. Alexander slipped cash under the plate, barely glancing at the total. He stood, pulling on his coat, then looked at Liam. "Let's get you somewhere safe tonight." But Liam shrank back, shaking his head. "I can't. He'll know if I'm not home." Alexander hesitated, heart thundering. He wanted to insist, to sweep the boy out of the storm into warmth and safety. But the fear in Liam's eyes was real, and pressing too hard now could shatter what little trust he'd built. So, instead, he crouched by the booth, meeting Liam at eye level. "Then listen to me. Tomorrow, I'll come find you. And when I do, we'll start changing everything. You have my word." Liam's gaze flicked between the window and Alexander's face. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. The storm outside screamed, but inside Alexander felt only the quiet resolve of a man who had failed once and would not fail again. As they stepped back into the night, snow stinging their faces, Alexander knew what his next call would be. Not to child services, but to a private investigator who owed him favors, and who knew how to dig where the law refused to look. Snow whipped sideways as Alexander tightened his scarf and guided Liam to the alley's edge. The boy hunched into his backpack, bare toes leaving fragile prints on the drifted sidewalk. Alexander's instincts screamed to scoop him up and never let go, but he knew this had to be Liam's choice. At the corner, the boy paused, pointing down a narrow side street. "Uncle's place? I can't be late." Alexander crouched so their eyes met. "I won't stop you from going home tonight, but I need to understand. Will you let me?" Liam clutched the strap. His voice trembled. "Uncle says if anyone asks, I'm clumsy. That's why I get bruises." Alexander swallowed hard. He wanted to rage, to storm down that street and drag the man into the snow. Instead, he nodded slowly. "Okay, you've told me enough for tonight. But I promise you this, I'm going to help." The boy studied him, searching his face for cracks. Finally, he whispered, "No one keeps promises." The words stabbed deeper than the wind. Gabe had once said the same, right before they took him away. Alexander pressed his hand against the cold brick wall, steadying himself. "Then let me be the first." Liam's gaze lingered on him a moment longer, then he turned and slipped into the storm, swallowed by white. Alexander stood rooted, every instinct screaming not to let him vanish. But pressing would mean losing him. He drew a slow breath, pulled out his phone, and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. "Sam," he said when the line clicked. "It's Thorne. I need you on something immediately. A child's in danger." Sam Carter, once a detective now running a private investigations firm, didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Where are you?" "South Loop. I'll send the address. I need everything you can dig up on a man. Last name Doyle. Mid-40s, guardian of a boy named Liam." "Got it," Sam said. "What's the angle?" "Abuse. Locking him in a basement. Neglect. I want proof. Photos, records, anything that sticks in court." Sam exhaled. "You know cases like this slip through the system. Judges toss them out on technicalities." Alexander's jaw tightened. "Then we'll close every loophole. I won't let this one fall through the cracks." They ended the call. Alexander stood there, snow swirling around him, his reflection faint in the deli's dark window. For years he had built towers, bridges, networks of fiber and steel. but he had never built a bridge back to his brother. And now here was Liam, living proof of Gabe's stolen years. He headed home, footsteps crunching sharp against the ice. His penthouse loomed above Michigan Avenue, warm light spilling from the high glass. He rode the elevator alone, the city glittering beneath him like scattered stars. Inside, he stripped off his coat and poured a drink he didn't taste. He walked to the window, frost creeping the edges of the pane, and pressed his hand against the cold. "Gabe," he murmured, voice breaking, "I failed you once, but I won't fail him." The city sprawled below, towers he had built cutting through the night sky. Yet, for all his empire, he felt powerless against the image of a boy shivering in snow, drawing doors to escape a basement. His phone buzzed. A text from Sam lit the screen. Preliminary records found. Multiple complaints filed against Doyle. All dismissed. Alexander's hand trembled as he read. Attached were photos. A narrow staircase, a padlock across a cellar door, rust creeping the hinges. The drink in his other hand crashed into the sink. He didn't even notice. His reflection in the window stared back, eyes burning, jaw set like stone. This wasn't business. This wasn't reputation. This was blood. He whispered to the city lights, to his brother lost in the system. "I lost you. I won't lose your boy." And with that vow, Alexander Thorne began a fight he knew would tear open every scar he carried. Yet he welcomed the pain, because for the first time in years, it had purpose. The city glowed faint beneath the frost, headlights carving slow lines through snow-choked streets. Alexander stood rigid at the window. Sam's photos spread across the glass table behind him. Images of a padlocked basement door, rusted hinges, concrete walls damp with neglect. Each picture seared into him, sharper than any corporate war he had fought. The phone buzzed again. Sam's voice came low, grave. "We got more? CPS records, school files, kids missed too many days, complaints by neighbors. All buried. Doyle's slipped through on technicalities every time. Judges tossed it. No one followed through." Alexander gripped the edge of the table, knuckles pale. "Because no one cared enough to fight." A pause, then Sam said quietly, "You care too much. That's what makes you dangerous." Alexander exhaled through his teeth, staring at the photographs. He had once been that boy, alone, unseen, abandoned to the mercy of systems that ticked boxes instead of saving lives. Gabe had been swallowed whole by those same cracks, and now Liam stood at the edge of the same abyss. "Sam," Alexander said, his voice steel, "order a DNA test, quietly. If Liam is Gabe's son, we'll have more than neglect. We'll have blood, and I'll move heaven and earth to make sure no judge looks away." Sam hesitated. "You really think the boy's connected to your brother?" "I don't think," Alexander whispered, gaze fixed on the backpack in his mind. "I know. Those drawings, they're Gabe's stars, passed down like a message." After the call ended, Alexander opened his safe, pulling out a slim, leather-bound journal. Gabe's, the only thing he'd managed to keep after the state scattered their belongings. He flipped through pages filled with sketches, stars, doors, scribbled notes. His hands trembled. The lines were the same, Liam's crayon echoes of a father he never knew. Alexander pressed the journal shut, his reflection in the frosted glass hard, unfamiliar. "This is my proof," he whispered. "Gabe, I'll bring him home." The next morning, Alexander sat in his private clinic, blood drawn with a simple prick. "Run it against the sample Sam collected," he told the lab director, who owed him too many favors to ask questions. "I want results yesterday." He spent the day pacing boardrooms, words of investors washing over him like static. Fiber networks, zoning permits, capital returns, hollow noise compared to a boy's whisper in the snow. By evening, he was back at the penthouse, glass of untouched bourbon warming in his hand when the call came. "Match confirmed," Sam said. 99.9. He's Gabe's kid." The world tilted. Alexander gripped the counter, eyes burning. He let silence stretch, then murmured, "I lost my brother. I won't lose his boy." His reflection in the glass looked like a stranger. Jaw clenched, eyes raw, shoulders heavy with more than empire. He felt the weight of both men, himself and the boy he had once been, meeting here in this storm of guilt and redemption. For the first time in decades, Alexander felt tears sting hot, then freeze cold against the windowpane. He bowed his head and let them fall because they belonged to Gabe as much as to him. Outside, snow kept falling, muffling the city as if giving him space to decide what came next. But Alexander already knew. The Empire could wait. The boy could not. The city hadn't thawed when dawn crept across the skyline, but Alexander had been awake all night. The photographs still lay scattered on the glass table, the journal open beside them. He had read Gabe's sketches until the ink blurred with tears he refused to wipe away. By sunrise, his decision was made, though it hollowed him out. At the penthouse window, the reflection staring back looked less like a CEO and more like a man cornered by ghosts. His deep blue eyes carried exhaustion. His jaw clenched as if bracing for another blow. He whispered to the frost, "How can I raise him when I couldn't even save you?" The question rattled inside him all morning. At the office, colleagues congratulated him on a new real estate deal that had closed overnight. He forced a smile, shook hands, spoke words he barely heard. His empire thrived, yet inside he felt fraudulent. Because what good were towers and networks if he couldn't keep one child safe? That evening, he found himself walking without aim, drawn back toward the South Loop. The blizzard had quieted, leaving icy drifts like frozen waves across the sidewalks. He shoved his hands into his coat pockets, collar turned up against the sting. At a corner store, he spotted him, Liam, standing awkwardly near the door, the faded backpack slung heavy on his small frame. His bare toes had been replaced with thin sneakers, laces frayed. He held a can of soup as if it weighed too much, eyes darting for permission that never came. Alexander stepped inside. The bell chimed. Liam froze, recognition flickering. For a moment, the boy looked ready to bolt. Alexander raised both hands in peace. "It's all right. I told you I'd find you." The boy clutched the can tighter. "If Uncle sees me talking, he won't," Alexander promised, keeping his tone steady. He reached into a paper bag he carried, pulled out a pair of winter boots lined with fleece. "These are for you, and cocoa mix. No tricks, just warmth." The boy's eyes flicked from the boots to Alexander's face. He didn't move, not yet, but his lips trembled. Alexander crouched low, balancing the bag between them. "I can't erase the storm, but I can walk through it with you. You'll never have to wait in the cold alone again." The words hung in the air like a vow. Liam blinked rapidly, as if fighting something behind his eyes. Then, timidly, he set the soup can down and reached for the boots. His fingers brushed Alexander's hand by accident. For the first time since they met, the boy smiled. Small, fragile, but real. Alexander felt the weight in his chest shift, the guilt loosening like ice cracking on a thawing lake. He had doubted himself, feared his world was too cold to raise a child. But in that moment, seeing Liam's shy smile, he understood. Maybe parenting wasn't about perfection. Maybe it was about presence. He helped Liam lace the boots, knotting the frayed strings tight. When the boy stood, taller now, toes warm, Alexander felt something new rise in him, hope. The boy's whisper carried through the quiet store. "Thank you." Alexander swallowed hard. "You don't owe me thanks. You owe yourself a future, and I'm going to fight for it with you." Outside, snow began to fall again, softer this time. They stepped into it together, side by side. For the first time, Alexander believed he wasn't just chasing ghosts anymore. He was walking toward something living. The courtroom air felt colder than the Chicago streets. Marble walls echoed with every shuffle of paper, every cough, every anxious whisper. Alexander sat at the plaintiff's table, shoulders squared, his navy suit pressed sharp. Red tie knotted as if for battle. Beside him, Sam Carter flipped through files, photos of the basement door, school absence records, medical notes quietly pulled from clinics. All evidence, yet all fragile in the eyes of law. Across the aisle, Doyle sat smug in a rumpled blazer, his lawyer whispering in his ear. His gaze cut toward Liam like a blade, daring him to speak. The boy sat between two child advocates, backpack clutched tight against his chest. His boots tapped nervously under the bench, the sound hollow against the floor. The judge, stern and tired-eyed, cleared his throat. "We are here to determine guardianship and the well-being of minor Liam Doyle. The court will hear testimony." Liam's hands shook when called to the stand. He glanced at Alexander, who nodded once, slow and steady, as if lending him breath. The boy rose, every step stiff, until he perched on the tall chair, legs dangling. The lawyer leaned in, voice oily. "Liam, isn't it true your uncle disciplined you only because you misbehaved?" The boy's lips parted, but no sound came. His gaze darted to Doyle, whose sneer widened. Silence pressed heavy. Alexander's chest ached. He wanted to storm the stand, to shout the truth for Liam. But this was the boy's moment. Still, he could give him something. He reached into his leather satchel and pulled out the backpack. Carefully, he unzipped it, revealing fresh art supplies, crayons, colored pencils, a small sketchbook. He held it up so Liam could see. The boy's eyes widened. He shifted forward, clutching the edge of the chair. The judge arched a brow. "Mr. Thorne, what are you doing?" Alexander's voice was calm, steady. "Your Honor, these drawings are not just scribbles, they're testimony. The boy may not have words today, but he's been telling his story all along." The judge gestured. "Proceed." Alexander laid out Liam's old crayon sketches beside the new sketchbook. Stars, doors, bars, shadows. The courtroom leaned in. He slid them closer to the boy. "Liam, you don't have to speak if you can't. Show us, the way you always have." The boy's small hand reached, trembling. He flipped open the sketchbook, picked up a crayon, and began to draw. Silence thickened, broken only by the scratch of wax on paper. Slowly, an image emerged. A small figure behind a locked door, stars drawn above like unreachable windows. He scrawled a heavy black X over the door. Gasps rippled through the room. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Doyle shifted in his seat, face draining of color. The boy set the crayon down, breathing hard. He looked at Alexander then, for strength. Alexander gave him the smallest nod. Liam turned back to the lawyer and whispered, barely audible, but clear. "He locked me in. He said I had to earn the stars." The courtroom froze. The words hung like thunder. The judge rapped his gavel. "Enough. This court has seen sufficient evidence of neglect and abuse." He looked at Liam, then at Alexander. "Custody will be transferred to Mr. Thorne, pending final review." Relief crashed over Alexander like a wave. He exhaled, shoulders sagging, eyes stinging. He looked at Liam, still gripping the sketchbook, but no longer trembling quite so much. For the first time, the boy smiled faintly at him. A smile fragile as glass, but real as dawn. Alexander whispered under his breath, to Gabe and to himself, "We did it. He's free." Snow still clung to the high-rises when Alexander brought Liam home for the first time. The elevator opened onto the penthouse, spilling them into a space of glass, steel, and quiet luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline, the lights glittering like constellations. For a moment, Liam froze just inside the doorway. His backpack clutched to his chest as if someone might snatch it away. Alexander crouched beside him, voice gentle. "This is your home now. No locked doors, no basements. Just rooms with light." Liam's eyes darted across the vast living room, then back to Alexander. do I go?" "Anywhere you want," Alexander said with a faint smile. "But I've got a surprise." He led Liam down a hallway. At the end, a door swung open to reveal a bedroom decorated not with corporate polish but with warmth. Blue bedding spread across the bed, shelves lined with blank sketchbooks, and a desk scattered with fresh crayons, pencils, and markers. The ceiling shimmered with tiny star-shaped lights, glowing soft against the white walls. Liam's breath caught. He stepped inside, releasing the backpack slowly, as though testing if it was safe. His fingers traced the edge of the desk, then reached for a sketchbook. He opened it, flipping through pristine white pages. For a moment he just stared, as though stunned by possibility. Alexander leaned on the doorframe, watching him. "Every page is yours. Whatever you draw here stays yours. No one takes it away." The boy turned, lips parted, eyes wide. His whisper trembled. "Really?" "Really," Alexander said, his voice thick. "This is your room, your stars, your doors." Liam blinked rapidly, then set the sketchbook down. He crossed the room and touched the string of starlights, his face bathed in their glow. For the first time, the shadow of fear lifted slightly. Later, they stepped onto the penthouse balcony, bundled in coats. Snow blanketed the railing. Alexander dropped to his knees, scooping handfuls into a mound. "Help me build a fort?" The boy hesitated, then joined him. They packed snow into walls, shaping corners, their laughter rising unexpectedly into the winter night. The city stretched beyond them, lights flickering like watchful stars. When the fort was finished, Liam crawled inside, cheeks flushed red, eyes bright. He peered out through the small opening. "It feels safe." Alexander's chest tightened. "That's the point." They sat there, snow crunching beneath them, skyline glowing. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence felt full, not empty. When the cold finally pushed them inside, Alexander tucked Liam into bed. The boy curled beneath the blue blanket, starlights twinkling overhead. He held his backpack close, though looser now, as if he might let it rest soon. Alexander sat on the edge of the bed. "Good night, Liam." The boy's eyes flickered open. His voice was barely audible, but it landed like a lightning strike in Alexander's heart. "Good night, Dad." Alexander froze, breath catching, eyes burning. Slowly, he reached and smoothed the boy's hair. "Sleep well, son." As Liam's breathing steadied into sleep, Alexander stepped into the hall, leaned against the wall, and let the tears fall freely. For the first time in years, they weren't only tears of grief, they were something else. Hope. The headlines came before sunrise. Alexander's phone buzzed endlessly on the nightstand. Alerts, calls, messages. Real estate. Titan in custody. Battle over neglected child. Is this a PR stunt or a family fight? His name flashed across every feed, his face beside stock photos of Liam clutching the backpack. By the time he reached the office, the storm had broken. Reporters crowded the lobby, microphones raised like weapons. "Mr. Thorne, are you exploiting this boy for sympathy? Is this about distracting from your stalled riverfront tech project?" He pushed past them in silence, jaw tight, bodyguards flanking him. Inside the boardroom, his executives waited, tense. One slid a tablet across the table. "The investors are nervous. The custody battle's all over the news. And the riverfront project? Permits are tied up. Rivals are using this, Alex. They're saying you're unstable." Alexander scanned the tablet, then set it down hard. "They're wrong. But even if they were right, I don't care. That boy's life is not leverage." A younger VP leaned forward. "But perception matters. If this gets worse, you could lose millions, billions. Maybe step back from custody until things quiet down?" The suggestion hung like poison. Alexander rose slowly, his shadow long across the table. His voice was low, controlled, but sharp enough to cut. "I built this company brick by brick. But don't mistake me, I would burn it to the ground before I abandoned him. If any of you doubt that, you're free to leave now." No one moved. The silence was louder than the storm outside. By evening, he returned to the penthouse. Liam sat at the kitchen island, sketching stars across fresh pages. The boy looked up, sensing the heaviness on Alexander's face. "They were yelling at you." Alexander set his briefcase down, unclenching his fists. He crouched beside him. "Yes, but what matters is this. You are safe here. No headline, no rival, no judge can take that away." Liam studied him, eyes wide. "What if they say you can't keep me?" Alexander swallowed hard. He placed a hand over the sketchbook, steady. "Then I'll fight harder. And if they push me out of my own empire, so be it. You come first." The boy's lips trembled, then curved into a small, almost disbelieving smile. He whispered, "Nobody ever said that before." Later that night, after Liam was asleep beneath the glow of the starlights, Alexander stood again at the window, the city sprawling beneath him. His phone buzzed with more alerts, rival CEOs circling like vultures, investors whispering betrayal. But for once, the noise didn't matter. Behind him, a boy finally slept without fear. And Alexander knew. The battle wasn't just in court. It was in boardrooms, headlines, and public opinion. He had chosen his side, and he wouldn't retreat. The press conference lights were blinding. Cameras clicked in rapid bursts as Alexander stepped to the podium, navy suit crisp, red tie steady against his chest. He scanned the crowded room, journalists hungry for blood, investors watching for weakness. His deep blue eyes were unflinching, though inside his heart pounded with the weight of a single boy asleep at home. "Mr. Thorne!" a reporter shouted. "Critics say you're exploiting a child to rebuild your image after the riverfront tech delays. How do you respond?" Alexander gripped the sides of the podium. His voice came low, clear, carrying the steel of truth. "This is not about business. It's about a child locked in a basement, told his silence was survival. If you want to question anyone's judgment, question mine for not seeing him sooner, but don't you dare diminish his pain into a headline." The room buzzed, flashes erupting. Another journalist raised her hand. "Your rivals say this custody fight has distracted you from your empire. Are they right?" Alexander leaned in, gaze sharp. "If fighting for a child distracts me, then let it. Towers and tech can wait. A boy's life cannot." Gasps rippled through the crowd. His words weren't polished PR. They were raw, unscripted, and impossible to spin. Hours later, back in his office, his COO stormed in. "Alex, you just tanked our stock by 5%. Rivals are seizing contracts left and right. You're risking everything." Alexander sat calm behind his desk, hands clasped. "Then let them. I didn't claw my way up here to hoard glass and steel while a child I love freezes in alleys." The COO blinked, stunned. "You love him?" Alexander's throat tightened. The words had slipped out unguarded, but they were truer than anything he'd said in years. He rose, walking to the window, city lights reflecting off frost. "Yes, and I'll say it again. Liam is my family. No board, no rival, no market chart will change that." That night, he found Liam curled on the couch, sketchbook open, starlights glowing faint across the ceiling. The boy looked up as Alexander sat beside him. "They were saying mean things about you on TV," Liam murmured. Alexander sighed, resting a hand on his shoulder. "People say mean things when they're afraid. But here's what matters. You and me, together. That's the only truth I need." Liam studied him, then whispered, "Even if you lose your buildings?" Alexander's smile was small, tired, but warm. "Even if I lose everything else, I won't lose you." The boy leaned into him then, resting his head against Alexander's chest. The city roared outside, but inside the penthouse, for the first time in decades, Alexander felt peace. Still, he knew the storm wasn't over. Tomorrow would bring lawsuits, rivals, whispers. But tonight, as Liam's breathing slowed against him, Alexander understood. Some battles weren't about profit margins, they were about promises, and he would keep this one, whatever the cost. The board advised retreat. His attorneys urged silence. Investors begged him to cut losses. But Alexander couldn't ignore the gnawing truth. If he bowed to pressure, he would prove every cynic right, and worse, he would betray Liam. So he chose the opposite of retreat. At a press gala downtown, with reporters crowding the marble steps and rival CEOs smirking from the back row, Alexander strode to the microphone. The cameras lit his face, every line of his jaw cut with resolve. "Tonight," he began, voice steady, "I'm not speaking as a CEO. I'm speaking as a man who's seen the cracks in a system meant to protect our children. My nephew, my son in every way that matters, was one of them, and I refuse to let him be forgotten." He paused, scanning the room. Silence pressed heavy. There are 400,000 children in foster care across the United States. Too many sleep in basements, alleys, shelters. Too many wait for someone who never comes. That ends here. He gestured, and behind him, a screen lit up with the new foundation's logo, Winter Haven. "I am pledging $5 million to launch Winter Haven, an initiative to provide emergency housing, counseling, and legal aid for children in abusive homes. This is not charity. This is justice." Reporters erupted with questions. "Mr. Thorne, is this just damage control? How do you answer critics who say you're hiding behind philanthropy?" Alexander leaned closer to the microphone, his blue eyes burning. "If protecting a child is called damage control, then let the damage spread. Let every headline carry it, because I will not apologize for doing what should have been done long ago." Applause broke from unexpected corners. Advocates, social workers, even rival executives who shifted uneasily under the weight of his words. Afterward, he stepped outside into the frigid air. The cameras followed, flashes bursting. But when he reached his car, Liam was waiting inside, curled in the seat with the backpack at his side. The boy looked up, eyes wide. "Did you tell them about me?" Alexander slid in, pulling the door shut. The noise of the crowd dimmed. He met Liam's gaze, voice soft. "I told them about us, about how you reminded me what matters." The boy hugged the backpack tighter, whispering, "Uncle always said nobody cared." Alexander reached over, resting his hand gently on the boy's shoulder. "And he was wrong, and I'm going to prove it every day." That night, back at the penthouse, Liam unpacked crayons onto the kitchen island, sketching stars and houses with warm lights glowing in their windows. For once, the doors in his drawings were open. Alexander watched, a lump rising in his throat. The fight wasn't over. Courts, rivals, and headlines would circle for weeks. But something had shifted. Winter Haven wasn't just an initiative, it was a promise carved into stone. And as Liam handed him a fresh drawing, a house under stars, two figures holding hands, Alexander realized he wasn't just keeping a vow to his brother. He was building a new legacy, one shaped not by towers of steel, but by second chances. Spring came slowly to Chicago, the snow retreating in gray slush at the curbs, the river breaking its icy shell. For Liam, it was his first season in years without fear of a padlocked door. On the balcony, starlight still glowed at night, but now mornings carried something brighter, hope. One morning, Alexander called him to the window, "Close your eyes." Liam obeyed, small hands fidgeting with the strap of his backpack. Alexander placed a long box in his lap. "Now open." Inside lay a telescope, polished silver, engraved with neat lettering. "To see the stars we once drew, together." The boy gasped. His eyes widened, fingers tracing the engraving as though it were magic. "Is this really for me?" Alexander smiled, his voice rough. "It's ours. We'll use it to find every star your dad used to draw." The boy's throat bobbed. Then he hurled himself into Alexander's chest, hugging fiercely. "Thank you, Dad." The word landed with a weight and warmth Alexander thought he'd never deserve. He wrapped his arms around Liam, burying his face in the boy's hair. "No, son. Thank you." That weekend, Alexander invited a handful of fellow CEOs and community leaders to the penthouse, not for business, but for something deeper. He stood before them, Liam at his side, telescope gleaming between them. "We build skyscrapers, we fund startups, we shape cities," Alexander said. "But what legacy do we leave if we ignore the smallest voices in alleys and basements?" Liam reminded me of that, and together, we're starting something new. He introduced a support circle for CEOs fostering children, a network meant to share resources, break stigma, and prove that success meant nothing without compassion. Several executives shifted uncomfortably, but a few nodded, their expressions softened by something unspoken. Later, when the guests had left, Alexander and Liam carried the telescope to the balcony. The night was clear, Chicago's lights buzzing below, but above stretched endless stars. Liam adjusted the lens, peering through. "I see them," he whispered. "They're not locked away anymore." Alexander looked up at the same sky, stars scattered like windows. For the first time since Gabe disappeared, he didn't feel haunted. He felt guided. He rested a hand on Liam's shoulder. "Every star you see is a promise. We'll keep them. Together." The boy nodded, his smile faint but sure. The telescope gleamed, catching the light, becoming more than glass and steel. It was a bridge between past and present, loss and love, grief and redemption. And as spring winds softened the city, Alexander knew they had built something greater than any tower. They had built family. Do you want to continue to part 14? Ban Danai. Continue Chat GPT Danai. The last of the snow melted from the sidewalks as Chicago slipped into spring. For Alexander, each morning began not with boardroom schedules but with a smaller ritual, lacing Liam's boots, straightening his backpack, and walking him to school. The city still pulsed with its usual demands, but his footsteps slowed, matching the rhythm of a boy finally free to breathe. Neighbors began to notice. The doorman greeted Liam by name. Parents at the school gate nodded, surprised to see a powerful CEO kneeling to tie a child's shoelaces. Alexander didn't care about their stares. Each ordinary gesture felt like reclaiming a piece of himself he thought was lost with Gabe. One morning, as they reached the corner, Liam slipped his hand into Alexander's. "You don't have to come every day. You're busy." Alexander squeezed lightly. "I wasn't there when my brother needed me. I won't miss this." The boy looked up, a shy smile breaking across his face. "I like it when you're here." Those words carried more weight than any corporate title, more value than any deal he had closed. Back at the office, his empire buzzed with unfinished projects and impatient investors. Yet his priorities had shifted. Meetings were shorter, dinners less about mergers and more about getting home before bedtime. His staff whispered about the change, some worried, some inspired. But Alexander knew. Towers could wait. Childhood could not. At night, the penthouse no longer felt like a monument to loneliness. Laughter echoed off its high ceilings. Crayon drawings covered the fridge. The telescope on the balcony became their shared ritual, searching for constellations, mapping stories in the sky. One evening, as they packed away sketchbooks and cocoa mugs, Liam asked softly, "Do you think my dad can see us?" Alexander's chest tightened. He pulled the boy close, eyes on the stars. "I think he's been guiding us all along. Every star we find is him saying he's proud." The boy leaned into him, comforted. And, for the first time in years, Alexander felt peace. Not the hollow peace of a closed deal, but the full peace of a promise kept. The blizzard that once threatened to bury them had become the storm that forged them together. No headline could undo it. No rival could weaken it. Father and son, bound not by convenience or image, but by love, by survival, by stars once drawn on scraps of paper and now shining overhead. And, as Alexander whispered, "Good night, son," he knew his greatest legacy wasn't steel or glass. It was the boy who finally believed he was no longer alone.